Welcome to Sons of a Gun, a podcast all about the DC universe. I'm Alex Gunn.
I'm Justin Gunn.
And I'm Pete.
Also
Gunn.
last name Gunn. And again, for legal reasons, we can't mention who our father is, but I think you know who it is.
You get what we're doing. We're triplets from a father that we can't say the name of. Wink Gunn.
But we are actually going back in time here. We are doing a rewatch podcast for Shazam! Exclamation point. Hey! Original release date, April 5th, 2019. Directed by David F. Sandberg. Screenplay by Henry Gayden. Story by Henry Gayden and Darren Lemke. The reason we're talking about this is because leading into James Gunn's new DC Studios universe, we still have a couple of movies that are going to be coming out that may or may not tie in some way. One that is coming out next week is Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you wanted to watch this first and make sure
It makes a lot of sense.
Exactly, yes. So we are watching this first or rewatching this first. Here's what I think we should do just to start it all off. Let's talk about our experiences and thoughts about Shazam. I definitely had some very specific experiences with it that we'll get to in a second. But,
interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll just tease that right here. But Justin, this was actually your first time watching it going into this, right?
Yes, this rewatch was a watch for your guy, JT.
Well, welcome to the world, buddy.
Welcome to Shazam. And I have thought that when I said the word Shazam, lightning would strike through my ceiling and into me, but it did not.
You do have lights going behind you there. I was looking for them to flicker at least when you said it.
That's me too. Believe me, I still believe. So I hadn't watched the movie before. Watching it for this, and I liked some of it more than I thought I would. So like it was definitely a positive viewing experience.
Mm-hmm. And Pete, I think you're a pretty big fan of this, right? Am I wrong?
Well, here's the thing. Like the first two times I watched it, I had a great time. This time, not as much, but I still think the ending of it really kind of, I feel like it nails the ending in a way that kind of makes you walking away with a better feeling. Because while it was happening, I was like, oh man, I don't remember this dragging as much or feeling as weird. And then, by the end, it still gets me a little bit. When the mom's crying, I'm crying. And then, I feel like it nails the landing.
Just out of curiosity, and by the way, for anybody listening, we're going to get into the actual plot of the movie in a second. But Pete, did you see it the first two times in theaters and this time watching it at home? Or
Yes.
Okay, so maybe that was the difference there, potentially.
Yeah,
For me, I saw it in 2019. It was one of the first big superhero movies that I took my kids to see. And I
the whole
asked online beforehand.
Well, the online is never going to lie to you. People online are always
no, but here's the thing. It's like I asked, I asked people, they're like, oh, wink. No, I asked, my film reviewer friends who had seen it at screenings, and I was like, hey, is this appropriate for kids? And across the board, what everybody said is they're like, oh, it's like a great 80s family movie. That's what it's like.
Horror movie.
It's like a great 80s family movie. There's some little scary parts, but nothing more scary than you'd expect from a family movie. I was like, okay, so that sounds good. Took my kids. And
starts pretty dark
with the first scene being a car crash caused by a small child who is rejected by a wizard who watches his father, John Glover, basically almost bleeding to death on the ground after the car crash. So I was like, ooh, this is rough. And I remember very distinctly sitting in the theater looking over my kids being like, are they okay? And they were definitely
Daddy
not
made
doing
some mistakes.
asking some questions about this. And I was like, okay, dark first scene.
Questioning your loyalty to your friends.
The villain here, it's fine. Then, for anybody who's seen the movie, a couple of other things happen as we meet the main character, Billy Batson. And then it flashes back to Billy Batson being lost by his mom in a very realistic way in the middle of a carnival. And again,
it's very clear rewatching that the mom was like not looking for that child.
Noped out of there. Absolutely. Yeah. But at the same time, again, lots of questions for my very little son at the time being like, what's happening? Why is this happening?
Can that happen to me, Dad?
And I was already gone. I was already out of the
carnival?
theater at that point to teach him a
you
lesson
walked out of there.
Yes, this guy.
I hope you gave him a compass before you left.
So that was rough. But that wasn't the most rough part of the movie. The most rough part of the movie, the part of the movie that I have not been able to forget in the intervening 4 years since it happened, is the boardroom
scene.
Yes, where Savannah comes in throws his brother out the window.
Throws his brother out. Like, doesn't
immediately.
His brother goes first out the window.
Yes.
And they really linger. They really linger on the rest of the board members being like, ah, like they're
not funny scared, realistically scared. And you get the 7 Deadly Sins, which are very like, they're CGI, but they're very like the Ghostbuster Devil Dog type thing. Like, I feel like it's the same mode. And I understand in retrospect what people are saying, because if you watch a movie like Ghostbusters, it's not necessarily that there's violence, like there's implied violence, some scary things happen, but it's mostly off screen. Here, one of the 7 Deadly Sins on screen straight up bites a guy's head off. People are screaming and sobbing as it happens. This is the point in the theater when we saw it that my children literally started screaming and sobbing and going, take me home, I don't want to be here anymore, take me home.
Oh my God.
For 4 years, with some regularity, I don't know why, it keeps coming up. And they keep being like, hey, remember when you took us to Shazam and it was the most horrible thing we've seen
ruined our lives?
Yeah, when you ruined our childhood.
Yeah, so it is hard to watch this movie without recognizing that it was legitimately a formative, traumatic experience for both of my children.
When you were watching that scene, did you find yourself looking down? The kids weren't there, just like
yes, I viscerally I felt it in my body while I was watching this time, even though they weren't there.
Well, it's playing in their minds on a regular basis, like whenever they just about to fall asleep, so that they're always watching Shazam in a way.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny because you picture the way you described that. My brother, we went to a zoo with the family. And my brother was like, "Oh, look at this thing! It's called the Arctic Blast. You get stuck in a wind tornado, and it's look at this cool air that's blowing over." And the kids are like, "You're basically locked in this sealed thing," and the kids were like, "Yay, this is fun!" And then they're like pounding on the doors, being like, "Let us out!" Like it goes so horribly wrong because they realize they're trapped in a wind tunnel and they can't get out. That's horrifying.
This movie is like a child prison, really. The thing, because I can't believe you had that experience, Alex, because watching this, I was like, this movie goes way harder than it needs to on the dark stuff, especially when it's the rest of the humor and stuff is so like goofy, very light. And it's just a weird mix, and it confuses who the audience is for this. Is the idea that audience is like Arrested Development adolescent 30-year-olds?
It's old Zachy Levi.
I mean, it's a DC movie, so sure, there you go. I do think, to your point, a couple of other things that I'll call out here, and I know we've just jumped into plot points, so apologies to anybody. Spoiler warning, I guess. But other things like them going to the nudie bar multiple times, my kids had questions about that.
Double
Santa
down.
Cursing and screaming and the whole jokes about Santa not being real. We didn't necessarily have that problem since we're Jewish, but at the same time, watching this, it was just like you're saying, Justin, it's this conglomeration of, is this for teens? Is this for families? Is this for adults who are, don't want the rest of the DCEU? Not 100% sure here. And it's unfortunate because it detracts from the stuff that does actually work pretty well. And one of the things that I'd say works pretty well is it's pretty true to the comics written by Jeff Johns. I don't remember where they netted out on this. I know he was involved in some way at this point with this movie, with the DCEU. But watching this movie, my big takeaway this time is it reminded me a lot of Stargirl, DC Stargirl on TV, just in terms of like that sense of whimsy, but also sense of darkness that they had in the first season. Curious if you guys got the same reaction.
Agree. I very much agree.
Well, you gave me flashbacks to that haunted little kid that one season that was the scariest fucking thing. And he was kind of like that ghost
Season
monster who would like disappear and reappear and stuff. So,
sorry, before we get too deep into it, I did keep promising to mention the plot of the movie in case anybody
let's do that.
for a while.
Good.
So in brief, there's this kid named Billy Batson. He's an orphan. He's looking for his mom. He is taken in in a group foster home by two very kindly people with very kind kids. He wants to immediately leave, doesn't want to be there. But at the same time, there's clearly some goodness in him. And after he saves one of his foster brothers, he ends up getting taken in by the wizard Shazam, who's been attacked by this guy Savannah, who was rejected, as we mentioned earlier, by him for the power, and has been searching for this power this whole life. Savannah has released the 7 deadly sins onto the earth and is going to wreak havoc. So Shazam needs his new champion. He becomes Shazam, which basically grows him into what is supposed to be the idealized adult version of him, but is actually Zachary Levi in a muscle suit. And then he tries to figure out his powers, which are shooting lightning from his hands, and doing other Philadelphia stuff. He uses it mostly to make money at first, and then ultimately realize he has to help out his family. And by the end of the movie, everybody in the family has Shazam powers. Savannah is beaten, and we get a tease at the very end there that Savannah might team up with Mr. Mind, a deadly, evil, super intelligent worm. So that's the rough plot of it. The comic book stuff really... I dug it more this time, being not sitting next to my kids, because the Mr. Mind stuff, very goofy for the comics, but they nail it. The Savannah stuff, I think we could talk about in a second, but like particularly the stuff with the kids feels like it's pulled straight out of, it was Gary Frank and Jeff Johns doing the comic, I believe. And it feels like it's that on screen, and that works for me.
Yeah, I thought this movie has the comic book stuff I think they get really right. The look of the movie is really well done. There are certain moments I'm like, this is like an Alex Ross cover to a Shazam book. When he's meeting with Savannah and fighting Savannah in the Rock of Eternity, like there's a point where Shazam's crouching down, and I was like, this is straight off the page. And I love that. And for a superhero movie, it looks great. It's like well shot. The CGI is pretty good throughout. There's a lot of dust. Really, it leans into dust being evil here. So maybe
dust is evil. I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, it's where the 7 deadly sins really live. If you look at too dusty, you got some wrath and envy.
Well, that is what they are. There's wrath, envy, dusty, sneezy, and Doc, right? That's at least 5.
A couple short, but yeah.
No, I can't count.
But those are them. Yeah,
I will say
my biggest sin is Doc.
My biggest sin is not being able to count properly. Just to throw out about the 7 deadly sins, they seem very generic to me, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit, particularly on this viewing, where like they get some mileage out of the fact that envy has been hiding in Savannah the entire time, and ultimately Shazam brings envy out by making him envious, which makes a lot of sense. But the rest of them, other than Gluttony having a big, mouth in his stomach,
I mean, that was pretty cool, though. That was cool.
But
you could tell who Gluttony was.
Exactly. You can tell who Gluttony is. You can tell who Envy is. But the rest of them, they're just monsters, and it doesn't feel like they do enough with them, I think.
I agree. It felt like this was a CG limitation. Like they couldn't differentiate them too much because it would have been a ton of extra work.
Yep.
So I see from a production reason why they did it the way that they did it. But
plus,
it would have been cool to have a more differentiation in just the color of them.
Yeah, but it's also like one of the things where like they do test screenings, nobody's going to be like, I would really like more lust in this. There wasn't enough gluttony. I would have liked,
come on, let's be fair. There's one pervert in the back who's asking for that.
Okay,
yeah, fine, and his name is Alex Zalben.
I was thinking to every test screening, like, this needs a little more lust. And like, sir, this is Toy Story 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stop twirling your mustache like that. We have warned you numerous times. Yeah. I want to talk about Darla and how cute and amazing she is. Right. Every time I see this movie, it's the one thing that is just like, absolutely fantastic. I mean, the fact that Billy Batson would get a hug from her and not immediately fall in love with his family is a little off-putting to me.
Yeah, he's hardened.
That melted my heart. I don't know how it could have not gotten to him.
That's crazy because I got you a Darla hug for your birthday this year.
Oh my God!
It's gonna hopefully soften you up a little bit, and you can join our family.
So she's played by Faith Herman, and I agree, she's pulled straight out of the comic book. She's great. And in fact, All the kids are great. They don't really necessarily get all equal time. We don't find a lot about Pedro, for example, necessarily. But they do feel like the bones of this family unit is there. Mary gets a little bit more time, and she's very good. But again, she's very side to the narrative. And this gets not to air too negative because, again, I think other than traumatizing my children, which I have a little bone to pick there.
And you're great at that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're killing it.
I'm pretty even about this movie. I think there's a lot of elements going on, and none of them really get the proper amount of time to fully develop. The family is one of those where it feels like emotionally it sort of skirts the top of Billy being like, oh, I don't have a family. Well, here's a family. I love this family more than anything. And that's kind of where we get. And we're missing some in-between points there. And that ties into what I was saying just before in terms of all of the kids, where they have the idea of arcs. But other than, I think, Freddy is probably the best one because he gets the most screen time. We get a really good sense. He gets fingered. Oh, I know what you're talking about, but
nobody else does.
Yep, Tom Green movie. Just to clarify, that's what Peter's
Freddy
making reference to, not the other thing. The Freddy,
never the other thing. By the way,
yes. Thanks, Pete. Thanks for clarifying and taking a hard stance there. Freddy has
now who's the pervert in the back?
Pete's there right next to me every time.
Yeah,
I say more lust, please, and he's like, yeah, me too. Anyway. Freddy has a good emotional arc. The rest of them don't. That was my point.
Well, and I will say, knowing we're familiar with the Shazamly through the comics, so we sort of saw this coming a little bit. But I think it's such a nice reveal if you weren't aware that they all become Shazams. That's such a fun moment in the movie when he he sort of solves the wizard's mystery and gives them all the powers of Shazam. It's such a great, even though I knew I was still really charmed by that. But I agree with you about their arcs. We don't get enough time to really meet all of them. And when they become so important, I was like, oh yeah, they're big now. I wish I knew what their personalities were when they were little so that I could like them when they're big. Well, exactly.
But the Darla part with Santa is hysterical.
And Darla really comes through.
Yeah, and it's like, she's like, oh my God, like she's kind of starstruck by Santa. That's a 2-second amazing moment. But
that's a tribute to the adult cast that they cast as these people. I think that's Megan Good, who is very funny and even like a scant role. And Ross Butler, who shows up as the adult Ethan. Is that the name of the character? Eugene. Ross Butler is Eugene. There's just like this quick shot after he gets the muscles where he's looking at himself. He's like, that was very funny. It made me laugh. And, maybe we'll get more of them in the sequel, but I think like they did a good job there. The absolute best one, though, the perfect casting of the movie is definitely not Zachary Levi. It's Adam Brody as the adult Freddy, which is perfection, like absolute perfection. Like the matchup of those actors is great. Adam Brody is great and hilarious. And you could really see the connection between the younger actor and the older actor there.
I gotta feel like it's Darla and then Freddy, but I'm with you on that. It's pretty good.
Number one Darla fan. Well, and I think it speaks to the emotional imbalance in the movie, like we're talking about a little bit, where like so much of it goes hard, and the moment where Billy goes and sees his mom, and we have to deal with this excruciating story of how she like abandoned him on purpose, and he immediately clicks over. It's like, I love this other family now so much, and it just feels like that's such a heartbreaking, like icky feeling that you have while you're watching that. And then to go into this other side where it's such a bright moment for this family getting superpowers, I was like, let's just set that up a little bit more rather than make us suffer. But also, we already know that Billy had a rough go of it. We don't need to suffer so much alongside him, I feel like.
Yeah, and what's crazy is like they don't even let up on that. Like the fact that he hands her the compass and she goes, "What's that?" is so much worse. Like you could have at least been like, she could have been like, "Oh," you know what I mean? The fact that it meant nothing to her was so much worse, and that's why he's like walking away like down the hall crying. I was just like, you guys could have let us off the hook a little bit there. Like it was so bad. I think
you could see a little bit of the screenwriting logic there in terms of why doesn't he want to stay in this great house? And the reason he doesn't want to stay in this great house is he wants to go after his mother. That is his main goal. That's the thing that he wants. And the only reason he would not go with his mother and instead go back to this house is if she was the worst person possible. So that's what they set up there. But to your point, it does lead, I think we're using the phrase emotional imbalance a lot, but it does lead to this thing that is just hard to watch and it's hard to moderate. What's the name of the guy? Asher Angel, who plays the young Billy Batson. Nothing against him, but that is
he's great.
He's very good. It's good. Particularly with the comedy, I think it's a hard emotional pivot going from I am emotionally destroyed by my mom to gee whiz, I love you guys. And it doesn't work. One thing I do want to ask about that we haven't actually got into yet is the other side of Asher Angel, which is Zachary Levi. He is absolutely one of my favorite anti-vaxxers. Actors. I always mix up those words. What do you guys think about him?
Oh my God. Well, before you did that bit,
well, just a little background on that. He, right when the press tour started for the new Shazam movie coming out, he put a anti-vax tweet up, and it was like, yo, dude, there's so many times you could have put this up and put your beliefs out there when people would have been like, that's weird, but it would have gone by the wayside. He finally has this movie to promote, and he drops that huge thing. The people who work at Warner Brothers must have been so pissed about that.
They ran over to his house, immediately threw his phone into the ocean.
It sucks because before, I'm a sucker for a rom-com. So Chuck, I thought he was fun in Chuck, and it just sucks that there's this other thing that's keeping me from enjoying his performance here. But I think that as the kind of wide-eyed, innocent new guy with powers, I think he does a great job of that. You know what I mean? It's just too bad all the other bullshit is kind of ruining it.
Well, and I think we're sort of orbiting the idea here that this movie, maybe across the board, has an immaturity about it. I think for the script, there's a little bit of it sort of feels like it's written by kids, where it's like, yeah, that's emotion there, sad. Or why don't we have it blow up? And it's like, okay, well, we don't need it there. And we're not dealing with the actual stakes and ramifications of these moments. And Zachary Levi feels immature in that way, where you're like, oh, I see why you think this is funny, but it makes me like you less when you do that. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit of there's something about him that is annoying.
So a couple of things about that. First of all, to be straight up, I have always found Zachary Levi like nails on a chalkboard for whatever reason. There's something about his delivery, and like you're saying, Justin, he just feels like he's trying so hard to be like, I'm the funny guy in the room.
Yeah.
And I find it uncomfortable and annoying, so I was already kind of against him going into this. So having almost nothing to do with his beliefs, I already didn't necessarily love it. But I do want to say something that I think ties into what we're saying and to actually back up something that Zachary Levi said on this recent tour. He was talking about how he feels like Shazam is the Deadpool of the DC universe, which everybody lumped on him for. I kind of think, based on what we're talking about, he's right in a certain sense. It's not Deadpool, and it's not Deadpool because he is not Ryan Reynolds. Zachary Levi, I don't want to put words into his brain or anything, but Zachary Levi wishes he was Ryan Reynolds. And well, he does. Ryan Reynolds has as annoying as he can be, has a perfect delivery on jokes. He knows how to sell a joke just naturally. And Zachary Levi doesn't have that. So it's sort of 50 to 60% of a Deadpool.
Well, you're comparing a kind of different styles a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that I felt were funny. The line where he goes
wait, before we move on to that, can I talk about the Deadpool thing for a sec? Are you going to talk about that? Just so we don't lose it. Because I agree that it's a similar thing. It's just coming from the opposite side. Ryan Reynolds is winking, knowing I'm inside this superhero thing and I'm letting you see it too. Haha. Well, it's the opposite with Shazam. He's sort of I don't know what I'm doing, but isn't this weird? So it's still pointing at stuff and calling out superhero and action movie tropes. But Ryan Reynolds, it's a little more winky and cool, and you're sort of keeping up with him. And with Shazam, it's you're a little bit past him. You know what I mean? From a comedic point of view, you're a little bit ahead of the joke, but he's still making it from that point of view. That's all I wanted to say, because I agree they're similar, but just that one little difference makes it taste different, I think, when we watch it.
Yeah, I do. I do think it's a different kind of style for sure. I also like the when they're just sitting on the Rocky steps and he goes, "Sick view. I can see why Rocky worked so hard to get up here." It's just a throwaway line, but it's funny. I thought that was a good line, and also when he's like running in the toy store and he throws the Batman figure at him, and it's like, "I'm Batman." I mean, that's pretty funny.
Funny that when he runs across the big piano, I was like, "Ooh, that's a smart reference that they didn't overplay. They just did it rather than being like, look, it's the piano from Big."
Yeah, they didn't start doing chopsticks. Yeah.
One is another character that we should probably talk about is Mark Strong as Sivana. This is the second time that he's played a villain in a DC movie. He previously was Sinestro in the Green Lantern movie with none other than Ryan Reynolds, who we were just talking about. This is another example, and I know we're lumping on this movie a lot, or at least I'm lumping on this movie a lot, but he does a great job. I think this is another like half-baked emotional arc that really struck me this second time through rewatching it, where there is a very strong connection between Sivana, who wants power at the expense of his, albeit terrible, family, versus Billy, who wants to leave this great family so that he could be with his mom, etc. So like there's this vague theme of families running through the whole thing, but the fact that it ends up with the I don't know, moral or whatever it be being like Shazam beats him by tearing out his eyeball and, just catching it before he falls off of a building versus anything to do with the lessons that they learned over the course of the movie about family or appealing to his emotional side or his family side or something like that. That core is missing there. It feels like there was a connection that they started with at the beginning and they're like, yeah, they both have deals with their families, right? And then it just kind of stops there.
So what you're saying is family matters is what you're saying.
Yes. Did you do that? Did you do that?
He'll squeeze in Family Matters.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, family definitely matters to our dad, who we can't tell who he is, but
we can't. That's exactly. Yeah. But we get it. That's why we have such a good relationship with him that we're secretly doing this podcast about him. I agree with you, Alex, because especially they worked hard to put these themes right there on the table. And then they ended up defeating him with getting into the mechanics of how they beat him by like pulling his eye out and all that. When I feel like they did all the work to be like, look, I'm losing to you, and Shazam's losing to Sivana until he activates his family. And then his family helps him defeat Sivana because his fake family of demons isn't real and they defeat them easily. So like it's right there. I'm just so surprised they didn't like give it that little bit of push to say it or whatever.
Or have a moment at the end where Billy tries to appeal to him versus just ripping his eyeball out and throwing him off of a building, like some sort of sense of not we're going to have the physical fisticuffs, but hey, come with us. Be, instead of taking this power that is fake, because Billy does say that to him at some point. He's like, this power is fake. This isn't real. They're trying to use you, please. But he does appeal to him earlier on in the movie. But in that final fight, I feel like there's an opportunity there for him to try again and be like, there's a better way. And
or even if it's like his family, the Shazamly doesn't leave him, family doesn't leave you. If the demons abandon Sivana, leaving him alone, and he's like, that sort of hammers the lesson home. Like, and if they move on to find another champion or something, right in the last moment, right before Shazam's about to punch him, the eyeball leaves him, and it's like, look, see, you didn't learn the lesson, and then I feel like it would have been combining the action with the themes, not to rewrite it here in the moment, but yeah, it was very close.
I agree with you, but the fact that we got the suitcase wedgie callback because that didn't happen, I kind of more for that though.
I love to bring that up because some characters we really have to talk about are the bullies because they're emblematic of, I'm like, does the people who made this movie know people in the world? there are so many characters in this movie. I'm like, what? The foster home woman who's like, hey, I hate to tell you this, but your mom doesn't love you. I was like, yo,
Yeah, that was a harsh talk.
cool it, lady. It's not your job to say that.
Well, and
then
also
the bullies.
just real note, quick note about the foster home lady. She apparently is a character from one of David F. Sandberg's other films, which is weird that he just brought that into the DCEU. But anyway, go ahead, Justin.
And have her say a line where that is like not at all connected to reality. But the bullies in this movie are so intense about bullying. They bully above all, and they're always together. When they're riding the Ferris wheel together, I'm like, you bullies ride the Ferris wheel together? I think you love each other.
Yeah, bullies ride the Ferris wheel together. I mean, it's kind of beautiful.
The fact that the bullies have nunchucks, I was like, you bullies drive this badass truck that you refuse to park without jumping over the curb? Okay, rebellious. And then they has nunchucks that comes out of his back pocket.
Well, I do think, Justin, I understand what you're saying, but I do think for a commentary point, we need to go to Pete LePage, a person who owns nunchucks. Take it away, Pete.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I felt very seen when the guy just casually had nunchucks on him. I was like, you're goddamn right. I mean, who's walking around without chucks is what I want to know.
That brings up a question for what's a nunchuck-worthy event? What places are you going where you got the nunchucks in the back pocket?
Well, I mean, if you're looking for trouble, you're going to have them on you and then have them visible. You know what I mean? So if you're a bully, I think the back pocket is a very logical choice.
I feel like I've never seen nunchucks used effectively. They're mostly hit into your own face as a nunchuck.
Well, you got that. It's an art form to learn it. So you got to be very careful with it. You got to know what you're doing. You got to have some kind of training with it to know how to handle it. So you don't. It's very easy to hit yourself in the face or worse.
Have you ever thought about having just a stick without a string connecting the two so you could have control of what's happening with it?
Sure, but then it's a different weapon altogether.
There's a reason Gandalf didn't have a nunchuck staff when he was trying to stop the Balrog. You know what I'm talking about?
Maybe he would have survived if he had a nunchuck staff. Just saying. Yeah. Should have turned his nunchucks into some chucks. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, boy.
Anyway, I did want to talk a little bit about setting up for sequels here. This gets back into the Savannah discussion a little bit because I do have a sense of like the way that they ended his arc was to set him up for that post-credit scene where he's in an insane asylum or jail or whatever, unclear.
An insane jail asylum.
Yeah, it's like a supervillain jail, it seems
yeah,
like.
Well, he used
honestly,
to live in
it
Philly,
looks like
Pete. They had a bunch of those, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You were in one. I bet you were in one for a while. After that nunchuck incident where you hit yourself in the face with it, and they were like, take him to the insane jail.
Yeah, he's there with Mr. Mind, and this doesn't show up in the movie. I actually had imagined it showed up in the movie, but it's a deleted scene. They did a deleted scene where they're sitting on those thrones, and they're like, hey, there's 6 of us. Who sits in the 7th seat? And there's a slow pattern on the 7th seat. And then Darla says, well, whoever it is, we'll love them completely. And of course, that's supposed to be a tease for Black Adam showing up in the sequel. That also ties into the fact that Black Adam was originally supposed to be the villain here until Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson was like, nope, I get my own movie. I'm going to do my own movie. I'm not going to be in this first movie just as a villain. We're going to introduce.
We don't know if they pitched him on it and he was like, no, this movie.
No, we actually know that.
We do know that.
We do know that.
Really?
He was supposed to be in it. He is a producer on the movie, but he made the decision and said, no, I want to do a separate Black Adam movie. We got to introduce Black Adam first, and then potentially he could work into the sequel in some way. But he is too big of a character to just be the villain in the first Shazam movie. So this is all a big way of saying I do think some of the slight hobbling of the Savannah storyline might have to do with the fact that they had to work around the logical villain of the movie being Black Adam, and instead we're setting up a bunch of other things that may or may not happen.
Yeah. Agreed. And it's interesting, like, is Black Adam going to show up in this sequel? Is it a post-credit? Like, you don't think so?
It may be post-credits, except for the fact that his movie tanked and they don't want anything to do with him.
That's what I think, but I feel like that movie tanked. They really believed in that movie, and that movie tanking may have happened long enough after they were like, Black Adam's in this movie, that they didn't go back and take him out.
If it's a post-credit scene, it's easy enough to pull that out. I'd also throw out there, not to get too much into backstage drama, but because Dwayne Johnson apparently made this power move of being like, we're bringing Henry Cavill back. We're going over everybody's heads. He's Superman again, which of note, they couldn't even get Henry Cavill for the first Shazam movie because we see...
They got his torso.
Yeah, the torso was great.
Well, it's actually that Zachary Levi's stunt double in the Superman costume who shows up there. And it is a fun
it's a fun moment, especially the fact that like milk is very prevalent was funny. I thought that was pretty well done.
Yeah, I was totally focusing on the milk as well. Same thing.
But that was a funny choice. Superman with milk, come on.
Milk was very prevalent. I heard at the focus screening you shouted the milk is very prevalent.
Yeah.
Right? They moved it up. They highlighted the milk. They put an extra light on the milk.
And more lust, please. Yeah.
You guys are the Statler and Waldorf of these screenings, and you got to make a change.
Just to finish this up, though, there was all this drama about bringing back Henry Cavill. Dwayne Johnson basically forced him into the Black Adam movie. Not forced him, but like over Warner Brothers' head or forced the issue. And it was seemingly this power play to be like the future of DC movies is Black Adam. That's where it all kicks off. And meanwhile, in the background, David Zaslav, who runs Warner Brothers Discovery, was like, no, I'm working with James Gunn over here. We're doing this own thing. And now Henry Cavill is out. Black Adam is not getting a sequel, all of this stuff. So could he show up? Maybe, but I feel like they're done with him at this point.
Yes, well, it makes sense. Once you go over the heads of the heads and try to do something, and then they're like, well, we didn't like that, so that's not happening anymore. Makes a lot of sense.
Yes. But what do you think, though? I mean, to get into sort of future speculation here, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods as of this taping coming out in a week, I guess, something like that.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What are you looking forward? Oh, yeah, you have more stuff about this movie, though, Pete. Take it away.
I just want to say a couple more positive
Where
things.
Else did you see milk in the movie? Take it away.
Yeah,
Where else was milk prevalent? Where was the prevalence of milk?
I wanted to say the ending with the credit animation and the music. I thought that was fun. I thought that was kind of like a good exclamation point on the end of the movie.
Just a note about that. I saw that and I was like, wow, these people saw Spider-Man Homecoming.
Oh, wow.
Man, look at this.
They did. I'm just Googling to make sure I didn't get the dates wrong. But yeah, Spider-Man Homecoming was 2017, 100% ripped off the end credits there.
Wow. Okay. I mean, you don't know that for a fact, but...
I mean, I can intuit it.
And on that note, you didn't see a lot of use of the Shazam family's last name, their actual last name, Marvel.
Oh, yeah.
Mary Marvel is her name.
Well, just to mention about that in case anybody doesn't know what Justin's joking about here. So originally it was Captain Marvel in the comic books due to rights structuring. Obviously, there is a Captain Marvel in Marvel, which I believe they did to, I never really understand this, but essentially be like, it was originally a Charlton character that was taken over by DC and they never register it. So Marvel was like, well, we can register it. And then they took it away. So eventually when they knew the movie was in development, it's been in development. It was in development for like almost 2 decades at that point. They rebooted the character in the comics and very specifically called him Shazam. Occasionally they'll refer to him as Captain Marvel, but for the most part, it's Shazam. And that's what they call the character going forward.
And that's why the term Shazamly has caught on when it used to be the Marvel family.
Yeah, and also they were right. I mean, Thundercrack did sound a little too much buddish, to use. So it was fun to use the Captain Sparkle fingers, and the way they were playing with that was a kind of a fun running bit, I thought.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's talk about Shazam! Fury of the Gods then, which again, coming out very shortly. What do you guys think? What are you looking forward to in this movie? Are you looking forward to this movie after this watch/rewatch of the original Shazam?
Well, the title makes me think it's going to be light. You know what I mean? Fury of the Gods seems like a light, kind of fun, comedy kind of adventure. So, yeah, I'm hoping that they learn from this movie, but by the title, it sounds like they're not. So I'm a little worried about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like I said, I like this movie more than I thought I would. I hope that they continue to make it better, maybe get a little more character development there from your main characters as well as just your random characters so that they feel more like real people. And
so mostly Darla is what you're saying, mostly Darla.
Potentially. I'd like to see more of the Shazamly there. I think they could be very fun. And I really hope, I think superhero movies, the look of them has fallen off a lot in the intervening years. So I hope they keep up the sort of great look of the movie that they had for this first one.
Yeah, I mean, one little worry is it looks like from the trailers, they've amped up the danger and the CGI and everything. There's big dragons and things exploding and buildings turning and everything. The good news is they got villains in Helen Mirren and Lucy Liu, who are great. I would happily watch them murder those children if that's the way the movie turns out.
Oh, wow.
Happens.
Wow.
They should
You're going to take your kids to that? Take your kids to
Probably not. Probably not. But there's that part of it. The other part of it, and this is a very niche thing. I don't know if either of you guys or anybody listening out there has seen a show called Starstruck, which is currently on HBO Max. So the plot of Starstruck is it's sort of like a sex reverse Notting Hill, where this woman meets a guy on New Year's, they hook up. She doesn't realize he's one of the biggest movie stars in the world, and they end up kind of dating and figuring things out. And over the course of the first season, he is in this big movie. I think it's called like Keys to Olympus or something like that. And
does she have a travel bookshop?
No.
Well, then
she works at a movie theater, though. It's great. Pete, this is apropos of nothing. You should watch Starstruck. You will absolutely love it.
A movie theater is like
or it's not a fucking Notting Hill.
A movie theater is like a bookshop for movies.
Yeah, for your mind.
For your mind.
Anyway, what I was saying was he goes on this rant when he sort of reaches a breaking point with this movie where he's talking about all the stuff in superhero movies and these big budget movies that make no sense. And he just shouts out the line, something like, "Why do you need keys to Olympus? It's a mountain. You could walk up it." And that stuck with me so hard and is not wrecked. It really did. Like, because
so hard.
Well,
what a sense.
Because I feel like there's these logical leaps we make when we watch these movies, and particularly when I've been seeing the trailer for Shazam: Fury of the Gods, where they're like, we have to break into the underworld with this combination of things using the power of Shazam. I'm like, oh no, they need the keys to Olympus. Oh, what a bummer.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's so much of that in superhero movies. Like, for instance, in this movie where in the Rock of Eternity, the eye of demons is kept in a cage that and whenever anyone's hand touches it, it opens.
Yeah.
I was like, what? First off, put this in a box with a key.
Yeah.
You have a crocodile door somewhere. Throw it in the crocodile door. Come on.
Oh, man.
Put it somewhere else. Why do you have your demons talking to your guests? I wouldn't have those demons chatting with the kids I've invited over to my...
Right when
Don't
you
put
come
them in the
in,
entryway.
go
Put them
by
in
the demons.
Exactly. Throw them through the crocodile door. You got. I don't want to push the crocodile door, but it's right there. So
seems like you're pushing crocodile door.
I know. Didn't you add a crocodile door to your house, Alex?
I did. They're very hungry. I can hear them right now. So we're probably gonna have to wrap this up quick. Any final thoughts on Shazam before we wrap up here, Pete?
Nope. No.
Milk is prevalent. Justin, what about
milk
you?
is prevalent? A couple moments. Obviously, there's a whole segment in the movie showing off the best power that Shazam gets. First off, success on YouTube. I think that's such a funny thing that we do a lot in movies, especially superhero movies, where it's like, look, the hero is becoming famous on YouTube, and I'm like, we cannot do that. There's just so many things where every superhero movie from a certain amount of time was made like no one had ever seen a superhero movie before. And I hope we're ready to move past that because we have seen all of them.
Dude,
and
YouTube's here to stay, bro.
Yeah,
I'm not saying YouTube goes away.
My final thought that I'll throw out there apropos of this podcast that we're taping right now is this movie is much more heavily in the DCEU version of the DC movies than I remembered. Even though they don't show Henry Cavill's head, it's pretty clearly Henry Cavill's Superman. They're pretty clearly like they have Batfleck's Batarang in there and everything they're talking about. They show off in the end credits, which Pete loved. They show off Jason Momoa Aquaman and Ezra Miller the Flash. So like it's very tied there. Given that James Gunn has talked about, Shazam is kind of on the side, this is definitely not on the side. I'm curious how on the side Fury of the Gods is. If we are going to get that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson cameo, if there are going to be other references, if they pulled them out or not. So that'll be an interesting thing to see.
Well, I think that points to whether or not the new regime, the Gunn Saffron regime, had any chance to sort of get their fingers in this movie and be like, you know what, let's.
But it seems like they didn't because they said perfect movie. We didn't do anything.
They delayed it like a year and a half or something, so they've had plenty of time to make changes, I think.
And I do think when the original Shazam came out, it was just like, well, anything goes. Let's make all these movies part of all one thing, even if it's like different Bat people are hanging around in them. And I think that's a big change that's coming under the new Gunn Safran regime, where it's like, no, let's be very specific about where this movie fits into the larger picture. So I bet this Fury of the Gods is going to be on the side firmly, and I think that's a good choice because like Shazam was never going to be. If you're making Superman and Shazam movies, they shouldn't be trying to fill the same hole. It's weird. They're too similar from a power set point of view and confusing to the casual person who isn't a huge comic book head. They're like, yeah, look at that Superman with a lightning bolt. Cool new shirt he's wearing. And it's like, no, you need a little difference makers here. So putting this to the side. Yeah. But I will say also
sometimes you don't get to pick your costume, all right?
Actually, most of the time you do. I mean, you pick your costume every day, right? Or does someone else?
I'm quoting Shazam to you.
Oh, got you.
Not familiar.
The movie we just watched.
Good? I haven't seen it.
Jesus Christ.
But Peter Safran is a producer of these movies. He's like had his hand in these a lot. So his hand was already in this movie, but when he took over, so maybe it was much easier to make.
Feel like more Safran? You want more Safran? Is that what you're
saying? Yeah, that's my favorite flavor.
You ever have some saffron milk, Pete? I think you'd really enjoy it.
Yum.
It's prevalent.
Expensive.
We will be back next time with our thoughts on Shazam Fury of the Gods. So do be sure to check that out. If you'd like to support this podcast and other podcasts, we do patreon.com/comic book club. Also, we do a live show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. to Facebook and YouTube. Come hang out. We'd love to chat with you about the DCU. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or the app of your choice to subscribe, listen, and follow the show at Comic Book Live on Twitter, Comic Book Club Live on TikTok and Instagram, comicbookclublive.com for this podcast and many more. Until next time, Dad, you're doing a great job.
Dad, keep it up. I'm sorry I didn't make our triple bunk beds this morning. I will as soon as I get home.